On the day of my anniversary, I walked into the restaurant holding a gift for my husband, only to find him kissing my sister. And the worst part? They didn't even look guilty, they looked relieved that I had finally caught them. Before we go deeper, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because trust me, you won't want to miss how this story of betrayal turns into the sweetest revenge. And tell me in the comments, what would you do if you caught your spouse with your own sibling? I should probably back up and explain how I even got here. My name is Clara, I'm 34, and if you asked anyone in town what word they'd use to describe me, they'd probably say selfless. I was the dependable one, the sister who would drop everything to help, the wife who sacrificed her dreams so her husband could chase his. And until that night at the restaurant, I thought that loyalty meant something. But let me take you back to where it began, because the truth is, betrayals don't happen overnight. They build slowly, brick by brick, while you're too busy holding the house together to notice the cracks forming in the walls. I married Ethan when I was 25. He was charming, ambitious, the kind of man who could talk his way into any room. I remember thinking, this is a man who'll build us a future. I was right about one thing, he did build a future. Just not with me. The first few years were good. Ethan had just started his own construction company, and I picked up extra shifts at the hospital to make sure we could pay the bills while he chased contracts. I told myself the exhaustion was temporary, that one day we'd laugh about how hard we had to fight in those early years. Then there was my sister, Rachel. She was only 2 years younger, and we were inseparable. People used to joke we were more like twins than sisters. I'd tell her everything, she'd tell me everything. She was my best friend, the one person I thought would never betray me. If you're still with me, drop a comment. Have you ever had a sibling who you trusted more than anyone else? I want to know how many of you can relate to that kind of bond. Anyway, Rachel was around a lot in those days. She'd stop by our tiny apartment with groceries when I was too tired to shop, or bring Ethan takeout when he was working late. I thought it was sweet, the way they got along. I thought it meant my family and my marriage would always be connected. Looking back now, I realize those late-night takeouts were probably excuses. I ignored the signs. I told myself I was paranoid when Ethan suddenly started putting a password on his phone. I told myself it was business stress when he came home smelling like a different perfume. I told myself it was nothing when Rachel started dressing up more whenever she just happened to be around him. I had built my whole life around them. Around us. I worked nights, skipped vacations, even turned down a promotion that would have moved us to another city, all because Ethan said the timing wasn't right and Rachel said she needed me close by. My sacrifices stacked higher and higher, and still I told myself it was worth it. Until that night. It was our 10th anniversary. Ethan had told me he was swamped with a last-minute client dinner, but something in his voice felt off. You know that gut feeling you get, the one that whispers even when your heart doesn't want to listen? I decided to surprise him. I bought a tie I knew he'd had his eye on, wrapped it in silver paper, and drove to the restaurant he'd mentioned. I walked in smiling, rehearsing the line I'd say when I handed him the gift, something like even busy husbands deserve a little love on their anniversary. Instead, I froze. Because right there in the corner booth, where the candlelight flickered soft and romantic, Ethan leaned across the table and kissed Rachel. Not a quick peck, not a friendly brush on the cheek, but the kind of kiss that comes from years of stolen moments. And the worst part? They didn't flinch when they saw me. They didn't look shocked or ashamed. They looked like they'd been waiting for this moment, like they were finally free from pretending. My gift slipped from my hands. The box hit the floor with a hollow thud that turned a few heads. Ethan's eyes met mine, and instead of guilt, there was relief. Rachel bit her lip, but it wasn't nerves. It was a smile she was trying, and failing, to hide. "Clara," Ethan said, his voice calm, almost rehearsed. "I guess there's no easy way to say this. That's where I'll pause for now. Because the story doesn't end with me standing in that restaurant, humiliated and heartbroken. No, that was only the beginning. If you want to hear what happened next, the lies they spun, the sacrifices I uncovered, and the quiet plan I began to form. Make sure you subscribe right now, because in part 2, you'll see just how deep this betrayal went. When Ethan said, "There's no easy way to say this," the room spun. The laughter from the other tables turned sharp, like knives scraping against glass. My sister sat across from him, her hand resting on his, and in that single second, my world collapsed. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the gift at his smug face and drag Rachel out by her hair. But all I could do was stand there, my voice shaking as I asked, "How long?" Neither of them hesitated. That's what gutted me most. There was no scrambling for excuses, no desperate attempt to cover their tracks. Ethan leaned back in his seat like a man finally freed from a burden. "About 3 years," he said. 3 years. Before I go further, if you're watching this right now, let me know in the comments, what's worse, when betrayal comes from your spouse, or when it comes from family? Because I can tell you, the combination will hollow you out in ways you don't even know are possible. Rachel avoided my eyes at first, but when she finally looked up, I saw it, not guilt, not shame. Defiance. Like she'd already convinced herself she was entitled to him, entitled to my life. "It just happened, Clara," she said softly. "We didn't plan it." The words made me laugh. A cold, bitter sound that drew stares from nearby tables. 3 years of sneaking around, and you call that something that just happened? Ethan sighed, as if I were the unreasonable one. "We didn't want to hurt you. But you've been absent. Always working, always tired. I needed someone who understood me." "Rachel understands me." My heart slammed against my ribs. Absent? I had bled myself dry keeping his dreams alive. Every double shift, every weekend I spent at the hospital while he took Rachel on business trips, had been for us. And now he twisted that sacrifice into neglect. Here's where the knife went even deeper. Rachel leaned forward, her voice calm, rehearsed. "Clara, you've always been the caretaker. You take on too much, and you lose yourself. Ethan and I, we want something different. Something more." It hit me then, they weren't just confessing. They were justifying. Turning me into the villain of my own story so they could walk away clean. And if you're still with me, don't click away yet, because what I discovered after that night made me realize their betrayal wasn't just personal. It was calculated. I walked out of the restaurant without another word. The cold air hit my face, and I swear it felt cleaner than the oxygen I'd been breathing inside. For the first time in years, I wasn't blinded by love or loyalty. I saw them for exactly what they were. But the story didn't end at heartbreak. No, heartbreak was only the beginning. 2 weeks later, the divorce papers arrived. Ethan didn't even have the decency to deliver them himself. A courier handed me the envelope, and inside were neat little pages spelling out how he wanted to split our life. Spoiler, it wasn't even close to fair. He wanted the house I had paid the mortgage on while he was reinvesting profits. He wanted half my savings account, claiming I'd built it during our marriage. And he wanted to leave me with the car, the bills, and the debt from his failed projects I had covered. If you've ever felt like someone was trying to erase you, piece by piece, you'll know what I felt in that moment. Leave me a comment. Should betrayal automatically forfeit someone's right to assets in a divorce? Because Ethan clearly didn't think so. And Rachel? She wasn't just sitting pretty in the background. No, she had her fingerprints all over this. I found out by accident. One night, unable to sleep, I logged into the joint email account we'd once shared for bills. Ethan had forgotten to unlink it from his phone. There, sitting bold and smug in the inbox, was a chain of messages between him and Rachel. They weren't just planning their future together. They were planning to push me out entirely. Rachel had written, "Once Clara signs, she won't be able to contest. We'll have everything, the house, the business contacts, even Mom's inheritance when it comes through." My hands shook as I scrolled. Ethan replied, "She's too naive to fight us. She'll crumble. Just play nice until it's done." That was the moment I stopped being the victim. That was the moment I decided, if they wanted a war, they'd get one. I didn't show my anger. Not yet. I played my part, the heartbroken, overwhelmed wife. I let Ethan's lawyer think I was too soft to push back. I let Rachel believe I was drowning in grief. But behind closed doors, I began keeping records. Emails. Bank statements. Even texts Ethan had foolishly sent to Rachel on our family phone plan. And the more I uncovered, the clearer it became, this wasn't just an affair. It was theft, manipulation, and betrayal so deep it could destroy me if I didn't fight smart. But revenge, real revenge, isn't about screaming or throwing plates. It's about patience. About letting your enemies think they're winning while you quietly prepare the blade. So I stayed quiet. I signed nothing. I smiled at Rachel's fake sympathy. And at night, I started sketching out my plan, a plan that would take time, sacrifice, and silence. But when it landed, it would burn everything they'd stolen right out from under them. And that's where I'll leave you hanging tonight. If you're hooked, and I know you are, smash that like button and hit subscribe, because you'll see exactly how I turned their smug confidence into their greatest weakness. People think revenge is loud. Screaming matches, broken dishes, dramatic confrontations. But real revenge, the kind that lasts, is quiet. It's patient. It's the slow turning of gears while your enemies don't even realize they've already lost. That was the lesson I learned in those weeks after Ethan and Rachel revealed their affair. To everyone else, I looked broken. Friends pitied me, coworkers whispered in the halls. Ethan's lawyer thought I'd crumble and sign whatever was shoved in front of me. Rachel came by with fake tears and offers of help that were really just ways to make sure I stayed in line. But the truth? I wasn't crumbling. I was calculating. Before I continue, let me ask you, if you've ever been betrayed, did you confront them immediately, or did you bide your time? Drop your answer in the comments, because I want to know if you're team patience or team explosion. The first step was information. I spent hours combing through bank accounts, credit card statements, and business records. Ethan had always bragged about being a visionary businessman, but the truth was uglier. Half his projects were propped up by loans in my name. Rachel wasn't just his mistress, she was his silent investor. She had been funneling money into his company for years, and together, they were plotting to leverage my assets to secure more. Then came the inheritance. My mother had passed away 2 years earlier, leaving behind a modest estate. At the time, Rachel and I agreed to split it evenly. What I didn't realize then was that Rachel had manipulated the paperwork so Ethan's business could benefit from her share. My own mother's legacy was being used to bankroll the man who had destroyed my marriage. That discovery nearly broke me. But instead of crying, I documented everything. Screenshots. Copies. Emails forwarded to a private account they didn't know existed. Every piece of evidence was another brick in the fortress I was quietly building. And here's the kicker, Ethan and Rachel underestimated me. They thought my kindness was weakness. They mistook my silence for surrender. That was their biggest mistake. The second step was allies. Revenge is never truly a solo act. I started small, reaching out to an old college friend who worked in finance. She taught me how to trace hidden transfers and flag suspicious accounts. Then I reconnected with a former patient's daughter, a paralegal who owed me a favor. She helped me understand how divorce courts viewed hidden assets and marital misconduct. Piece by piece, I built a quiet network of people who could give me information without tipping Ethan or Rachel off. And every time I uncovered another lie, another theft, my resolve hardened. Midway through this stage, I asked myself, what outcome do I really want? Did I want Ethan begging on his knees? Did I want Rachel exiled from the family forever? Or did I want something deeper, justice that couldn't be undone? The answer was clear. I wanted them to lose everything they had stolen, not just from me, but from the years of sacrifices they'd twisted into excuses. So my plan shifted. This wasn't just about divorce. This was about dismantling their entire scheme. One night, while Rachel was texting me her fake condolences, I was sitting in my apartment drafting a new will. I wasn't dying, but I wanted to secure my assets in a way that kept them out of Ethan's greedy hands. A lawyer friend helped me create a trust, funneling what little I had into protected accounts. Then, slowly, I began seeding traps. I let Ethan believe I was considering signing the divorce papers. I let Rachel think I was leaning on her for support, feeding her little pieces of information I wanted her to have. I played the role of the broken woman so convincingly that they relaxed, lowering their guard, making bolder moves. And oh, did they get bold? Ethan bragged in an email to Rachel, "She's folding. Give it another month, and we'll have everything tied up." Rachel replied, "Perfect. Then we can finally go public without looking like the bad guys." Reading those words was like swallowing glass. But instead of choking, I smiled. Because the louder their confidence grew, the easier it would be to pull the rug from under them. Here's the thing about betrayal, it teaches you to play the long game. And the long game requires patience. So I waited. I let weeks turn into months. On the outside, I looked thinner, tired, barely holding it together. Inside, I was sharper than ever, building my arsenal one quiet step at a time. And just when they thought they had me exactly where they wanted, that's when I struck. But you'll have to wait for part 4 to see how. If you're hooked right now, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter, and tell me in the comments, would you let them think they've won before taking your revenge, or would you strike fast? People think revenge is loud. Screaming matches, broken dishes, dramatic confrontations. But real revenge, the kind that lasts, is quiet. It's patient. It's the slow turning of gears while your enemies don't even realize they've already lost. That was the lesson I learned in those weeks after Ethan and Rachel revealed their affair. To everyone else, I looked broken. Friends pitied me, coworkers whispered in the halls. Ethan's lawyer thought I'd crumble and sign whatever was shoved in front of me. Rachel came by with fake tears and offers of help that were really just ways to make sure I stayed in line. But the truth? I wasn't crumbling. I was calculating. Before I continue, let me ask you, if you've ever been betrayed, did you confront them immediately, or did you bide your time? Drop your answer in the comments, because I want to know if you're team patience or team explosion. The first step was information. I spent hours combing through bank accounts, credit card statements, and business records. Ethan had always bragged about being a visionary businessman, but the truth was uglier. Half his projects were propped up by loans in my name. Rachel wasn't just his mistress, she was his silent investor. She had been funneling money into his company for years, and together, they were plotting to leverage my assets to secure more. Then came the inheritance. My mother had passed away 2 years earlier, leaving behind a modest estate. At the time, Rachel and I agreed to split it evenly. What I didn't realize then was that Rachel had manipulated the paperwork so Ethan's business could benefit from her share. My own mother's legacy was being used to bankroll the man who had destroyed my marriage. That discovery nearly broke me. But instead of crying, I documented everything. Screenshots. Copies. Emails forwarded to a private account they didn't know existed. Every piece of evidence was another brick in the fortress I was quietly building. And here's the kicker, Ethan and Rachel underestimated me. They thought my kindness was weakness. They mistook my silence for surrender. That was their biggest mistake. The second step was allies. Revenge is never truly a solo act. I started small, reaching out to an old college friend who worked in finance. She taught me how to trace hidden transfers and flag suspicious accounts. Then I reconnected with a former patient's daughter, a paralegal who owed me a favor. She helped me understand how divorce courts viewed hidden assets and marital misconduct. Piece by piece, I built a quiet network of people who could give me information without tipping Ethan or Rachel off. And every time I uncovered another lie, another theft, my resolve hardened. Midway through this stage, I asked myself, what outcome do I really want? Did I want Ethan begging on his knees? Did I want Rachel exiled from the family forever? Or did I want something deeper, justice that couldn't be undone? The answer was clear. I wanted them to lose everything they had stolen, not just from me, but from the years of sacrifices they'd twisted into excuses. So my plan shifted. This wasn't just about divorce. This was about dismantling their entire scheme. One night, while Rachel was texting me her fake condolences, I was sitting in my apartment drafting a new will. I wasn't dying, but I wanted to secure my assets in a way that kept them out of Ethan's greedy hands. A lawyer friend helped me create a trust, funneling what little I had into protected accounts. Then, slowly, I began seeding traps. I let Ethan believe I was considering signing the divorce papers. I let Rachel think I was leaning on her for support, feeding her little pieces of information I wanted her to have. I played the role of the broken woman so convincingly that they relaxed, lowering their guard, making bolder moves. And oh, did they get bold? Ethan bragged in an email to Rachel, "She's folding. Give it another month, and we'll have everything tied up." Rachel replied, "Perfect. Then we can finally go public without looking like the bad guys." Reading those words was like swallowing glass. But instead of choking, I smiled. Because the louder their confidence grew, the easier it would be to pull the rug from under them. Here's the thing about betrayal, it teaches you to play the long game. And the long game requires patience. So I waited. I let weeks turn into months. On the outside, I looked thinner, tired, barely holding it together. Inside, I was sharper than ever, building my arsenal one quiet step at a time. And just when they thought they had me exactly where they wanted, that's when I struck. But you'll have to wait for part 4 to see how. If you're hooked right now, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter, and tell me in the comments, would you let them think they'd won before taking your revenge, or would you strike fast? People ask me sometimes, how did you not lose your mind when you found out? The truth? I did lose it. For a few days, I was a ghost walking through my own life, numb and hollow. But once the fog lifted, all I could feel was clarity. I had been underestimated my whole life. As the good sister. The supportive wife. The woman who sacrifices and never complains. Ethan and Rachel thought that meant I was weak. But they forgot one thing, women like me know how to endure. And endurance makes us dangerous. Before I reveal what I did, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because trust me, this is where the slow burn turns into fire. And I want to know in the comments, have you ever let someone dig their own grave while you quietly held the shovel? The first domino I tipped was financial. Remember those months I spent quietly collecting evidence? Well, I finally slid it across a polished desk to my divorce lawyer. He looked at the files, raised his eyebrows, and said one word, perfect. Hidden accounts. Misappropriated funds. Loans in my name without my consent. It was enough to flip the entire divorce case upside down. Ethan had thought he could walk into court with swagger and walk out with everything. Instead, he walked into a trap. When his lawyer presented the settlement, the one where I was supposed to give him the house and half my savings, my lawyer calmly dropped the folder of evidence on the table. Emails. Bank statements. Copies of Rachel's messages about bleeding Clara dry. The color drained from Ethan's face. His lawyer's smug expression curdled into panic. And for the first time, I saw fear flicker in Rachel's eyes. "Where did you?" Ethan started, but my lawyer cut him off. "Doesn't matter. What matters is this, if you push for more, we file for marital misconduct and fraud. You'll lose everything. If you agree to our terms, maybe, just maybe, you'll keep your reputation intact." For once, Ethan had no smooth words. But I wasn't done. See, Ethan's construction company wasn't just his pride, it was his mask. Behind the glossy contracts and staged photos, he was cutting corners, defrauding clients, and pocketing money that didn't belong to him. And thanks to Rachel's emails, I had proof. I didn't run to the authorities immediately. No. I let him believe the divorce settlement was the endgame. I let him sign papers thinking he'd salvaged something. And then, just as he was celebrating his fresh start with Rachel, I dropped the hammer. Anonymously, of course. A thick envelope landed on the desk of a state investigator. Inside, contracts, financial discrepancies, and emails that tied Ethan's company to fraud. And the best part? Rachel's name was all over it too. She hadn't just been his mistress, she was his accomplice. The fallout was delicious. It started small. A whispered rumor in the business community. A nervous client backing out of a deal. Then it snowballed. By the time investigators formally opened the case, Ethan's company was bleeding contracts. His investors pulled out. His employees started jumping ship. Rachel tried to spin it, of course. She told anyone who'd listen that I was bitter, that I was trying to ruin their happiness. But here's the thing about evidence, it speaks louder than gossip. And once those documents became public record, no amount of spin could save her. I remember sitting in my quiet apartment, sipping coffee, watching the evening news as the anchor reported, local businessman Ethan Carter under investigation for fraud. Sources say his business partner, Rachel Carter, may also be implicated. Yes, she had even taken his last name by then. And now they were both being dragged through the mud together. I didn't smile. Not outwardly. But inside, I felt something crack open, not joy, exactly, but justice. But revenge isn't just about destruction. It's about timing. And I still had one more card to play. See, Rachel always craved recognition. Growing up, she hated being Clara's little sister. She wanted the spotlight. So while their world was collapsing, I gave her a stage. I leaked one more piece of evidence, a series of texts where Rachel admitted to orchestrating the scheme to cut me out of Mom's inheritance. I sent them to my extended family. Aunts, uncles, cousins. People who had always adored Rachel's charm and pitied my boring stability. Those texts spread like wildfire in the family group chat. And suddenly, Rachel wasn't the golden child anymore. She was the snake. The phone calls started pouring in. Relatives apologizing to me for ever doubting, for ever siding with her. For the first time in years, the family saw her for what she truly was. That cut deeper for Rachel than any courtroom could. If you're still watching, here's where I'll leave you on a cliffhanger. The final stage of my revenge wasn't legal. It wasn't financial. It was personal. Because justice isn't complete until the people who betrayed you feel the weight of what they've done. And in part 5, I'll show you exactly how I delivered the final blow, one they never saw coming. So hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment. Do you think I should have stopped after ruining their finances, or was I right to go all the way? Trust me, the finale is worth it. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I say it's better served with a witness list, a purpose, and a quiet conscience. When part 4 finished, when those documents hit the investigator's desk and the news anchors finally stopped using pity in their voices, Ethan and Rachel started to panic. Their empire collapsed faster than they could rebuild a story to explain it. Investors vanished. Former clients demanded audits. People who had smiled at their house parties now avoided their texts. But devastation alone wasn't closure for me. Watching them lose contracts and prestige felt raw and satisfying for a moment, yes, but it wouldn't return the years they stole, the nights I missed with my mother, the dignity they tried to erase. So I planned the last move to do two things at once, make them watch themselves lose what they'd wanted most, and turn the wreckage into something that mattered. Here's how it ended. I negotiated a settlement through my lawyer that did a few important things. First, it protected me from any financial bleed from Ethan's imploding ventures. Second, and this was the part I'd labored over, it transferred certain contested assets into a trust with strict stipulations. Not for me to live grandly, but to be used as my mother would have wanted, community programs, scholarships, and small business grants for women who were starting over. Ethan and Rachel expected a settlement that would let them salvage appearances. They planned a PR move, a philanthropic relaunch where they would publicly announce their commitment to righting past wrongs. They even hired a firm to script their redemption. They were going to become the repentant power couple on some local morning show, tears and all. They never saw the stage I built. On the evening of the relaunch, a gala they'd rented a ballroom for, complete with a string quartet and a cyan spotlight, I walked in like a ghost who had chosen to show up. I wore something simple. Revenge didn't need sparkle. It needed to be visible, steady, and undeniable. They stood at the podium expecting applause. Instead, they faced a room full of people who had read the papers, who had been burned by unfinished projects, who'd lost deposits or jobs. Many faces I recognized from the social circuit. Many I'd met during my months of quiet work, the single mother whose small bakery had been subcontracted by Ethan and then never paid, the foreman who'd been offered a buyout only when the company was failing, the young designer Rachel had used on a branding project and then ghosted. Before Ethan could smile his way into a script, I took the microphone. "Good evening," I said. The quartet fell silent. "Thank you for coming to what I hope will be the start of something real." There was a ripple of curiosity through the room. Ethan shifted, open mouth, as if the teleprompter had malfunctioned. Rachel's smile froze. I walked through the story, not as a victim, but as a steward of what came next. I read selected excerpts from the texts they'd sent each other, the ones Rachel had written about bleeding me dry. I read the email in which Ethan joked about closing out a client by disguising invoices. I did not scream. I did not attack. I read, calmly, plainly, and the words had the effect of a court transcript in a place built for celebration. When I finished, I announced what the trust would do. "Starting next month," I said, "the Florist Trust will provide 5 microgrants a quarter to local female entrepreneurs. We will fund vocational scholarships for single parents. And we will create a small emergency fund to help contractors and workers who were harmed by unethical business practices recover and refinance." Someone in the back started to clap. Then another. The room filled, and the applause built into something that sounded, in my ears, like repair. Ethan tried to speak. He made an effort to sound contrite, the PR script on his tongue. "Clara, he began. "Save it," I said. My voice was soft but it carried. "I didn't take this small stage to watch you practice your lines. You'll have a chance in the legal system to answer for what you've done. Tonight isn't about you. Tonight is about the people you used." That was the personal finish. Watching the couple fumble through prepared statements while the room pivoted to the people they'd harmed was the humiliation they'd earned, but it was not my goal to exult in that shame. The real victory was the pivot, the money and visibility I redirected to people who would build instead of break. After the gala, the trust's first grants went to a single mother who turned her kitchen into a catering business, to the designer who launched a brand studio for women-owned small biz, and to a crew of former subcontractors who pooled their microloans into a cooperative. I sat in on the first meetings, awkwardly, gratefully, and watched people cry at the table as their ideas began to look possible again. That was the kind of payback my life needed, not petty revenge, but restitution that mattered. And yet, the last personal blow still had to land. Ethan and Rachel would watch as their name disappeared from charity programs, as their PR attempts failed to repair the relationships they'd sacrificed. But I wanted them to feel what it felt like to be excluded from a family they'd hoped to inherit. So I called a small family reunion. I told a few relatives the truth over coffee, one by one. I handed them printouts of Rachel's texts, quietly, without drama. Their reactions were not my glee, they were a necessary correction. The family group chat that had once celebrated Rachel's every cleverness finally turned on her. The apologies came slowly, awkwardly. Some relatives called me to say they were sorry for ever dismissing me. A few sent messages that made Rachel's social calendar brittle with cancellations. Rachel called me at midnight the day after the gala. She left a voicemail, part apology, part accusation. She asked me why I'd done it. "We were going to have a life," she whispered, voice breaking. "We were going to be happy." I listened. I didn't return the favor of rage. Instead, I called her back once, for 10 minutes, and asked her one question: do you want to be better, or do you want to be right? She couldn't answer. What surprised me most about the finale was not the downfall of the other two. It was what fell away from me during the process. I'd spent so long cataloging pain and building evidence, imagining the exact shape of their ruin, that I hadn't left much room to wonder what came after. The truth, closure arrived in small, quiet ways. In the single mother who hugged me at the trust's first awards night and told me I'd given her more than money, I'd given her belief. In the neighbor who brought over homemade soup and said, "We had no idea." In the nights I slept without rehearsing every confrontation. The world didn't become perfect. It simply shifted to a new equilibrium where my choices mattered. People ask if I ever regretted the path I took. Sometimes I think about the woman I used to be, the one who said yes to everything at the expense of herself. Then I think about the women I met after, the ones whose nights looked like mine once had, exhausted, hopeful, afraid. And I know I'd do it all again for them. If you're still watching, tell me in the comments, what would you have done differently? Would you have forgiven quietly, struck loudly, or built something new from the ruins? I read every comment. Finally, because I know you'll ask, no, I didn't become the person I hated. I became someone stricter about boundaries and smarter about love. I learned that revenge without repair is empty. So I took what I could and turned it into repair. And that, more than anything else, felt like justice. Thanks for listening. If you want more stories like this, raw, personal, and with a payoff, you know what to do. Subscribe, hit the bell, and stay. I'll see you in the next one.